Welcome to Max Group. I'm Chelsea Peterson. I'm the owner and clinical director of Cache Valley Counseling, and I am going to be sharing 5 tips for improving parent-child communication in today's Max Group. So I'm excited to talk to you today about this a little bit and share a little bit of tips and tricks about how to really communicate. Children are so different, and as the joke has gone for many years, I wish each one of them came with their own little manual of, how to parent me. When they arrive on earth, they just have a little pamphlet. It would be really, really helpful. And because not every child is created the same, and every child needs something a little bit different. And so it's tweaking your parenting a little bit. Parenting is kind of a tough gig, and every child needs something a little bit different. And so it definitely keeps you on your toes and can be emotionally exhausting and draining. But just want to remind you that if you are struggling and you're listening to this, please make sure that you're reaching out to your medical professionals and even to 911 or 988 if you're struggling with any suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm. Please make sure that you are getting the support that you need. Today's topic isn't going to touch too much on that stuff, and so those of you who are listening may not be struggling with that, or maybe you are because you feel like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot parent my children anymore. It is too difficult. But again, I want to just kind of focus on the 5 tips for improving parent-child communication. First tip is just really understanding how your child communicates. They are really complex creatures. They have a lot of, developmentally, they're always changing. And I was reading somewhere the other day that up until about age 7, they are in a different kind of like limbic brain. And they have like they are able to access calmer emotions. And at the same time, calmer emotions can also elicit a lot bigger responses. So we get a lot of tantruming and a lot of crying and a lot of things like that, which is really, really great. But some kids don't do that either. Some kids, get really, really vocal and might show their emotions by being aggressive or loud. And other kids, it might be totally subtle, like facial expressions. Body language, tone of voice, things like that. So really tuning into, how does my child communicate? How do they let me know that they're doing great? What does great look like? And what does not so great look like? And how do I know when maybe they're a little bit off? Again, could be really subtle. And this is going to be ever changing, right? Because their brain is growing, they're developing, and emotionally they're growing and developing. And so things are constantly kind of changing for people, particularly kids, as they're growing and developing. And so just when you think you have them figured out, they are probably going to change and do something different. But in each of those kind of developmental phases, getting to know your child better can be really helpful in helping you more effectively communicate with them. Some kids are not great with words. Some kids get really wordy and can have words to express what they're feeling. And a lot of kids don't know. They just know, like, I want that toy and you're not letting me. And so I feel, they don't even know, like, they feel angry, right? They just know, like, you're making me upset. And many of them can't even say those words, right? Even as I say that out loud, like, many of them cannot say or don't say, you're making me upset, right? And so it does take a little bit of teaching and a little bit of coaching of, what's happening in your body right now that's telling me I don't like this, right? This doesn't feel comfortable to me. I don't enjoy this. And being able to help them put words to it. Help me understand. Are you frustrated? How do you know that you're frustrated? What in your body tells you that you're frustrated? And helping them, sometimes giving them the words a little bit can be helpful. What I often find is then parents want them to put even more words to it. Like, oh, you're feeling frustrated? Well, tell me about frustration. What's it like? And they just developmentally, many kids, particularly kids below age like 12, just don't have words to put towards emotions in general. And so really pushing for people to communicate, or kids to communicate, trying to avoid that. Oftentimes what I see happening, which is tip number 2, is that parents flip into lecturing. Well, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't feel this way, or this is why you should have done it this way. This is what's frustrating you. And they try and fix it. They try and lecture, and that just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to us as adults, and it definitely doesn't feel good to your kid. So it doesn't create open space for them to come and feel like they can talk to you or have open dialogue with you. So really try to avoid lecturing or telling them how they should fix it or how they should feel. Is really tip number 2. Tip number 3 is listening to your child even if you disagree. I have a hard time with this one because oftentimes, I'll give you an example. My 6, almost 7-year-old he has big emotions. He has really big emotions, and he lets us know them all the time. And he usually gets relatively aggressive. And he even said something the other day. We have a lot of cousins and friends around all the time, and his cousin was doing something, and all he said was, I said, well, why did he throw a shoe at him? And he said, well, because he's dumb. I immediately want to jump into, well, he's not dumb. Let's figure out what he's trying to do. And, of course, there's being respectful. And so we talk about, well, why do you think he's dumb? Help me understand that. Rather than, again, a lot of parents flip into lecturing. He's not dumb. You're being disrespectful. Don't talk about that. And ultimately, again, I'm not perfect at this, and I often get it wrong myself. But as I sit with him and I'm able to talk to him about, like, well, tell me about why you feel like he's dumb. Help me understand that. My son is able to feel more heard, and he is back to feeling better in no time. So again, we don't want to encourage being disrespectful or things like that, but oftentimes we need to connect with where they're at before they're really going to listen to us. Another example of, again, he gets really big. He gets this one child of mine. They all have their own issues, but he definitely has really big emotions. And if I try and talk to him in a really calm voice of like, let's calm down. Hey, let's do this differently. Oftentimes he doesn't hear me, and he doesn't want to hear me. And so oftentimes if I get elevated or elevate my voice of, Bridger, we need to do this, or hey, you need to go punch a punching bag, or hey, what can we do different? If I get even not yelling at him, not getting so vocal that I become scary, but that I'm letting him know, like, I feel the frustration too, right? If I'm our emotional brains are not able to connect if it feels like we're in completely different hemispheres. And so it really is hard to listen to your child, especially when you disagree with them, but giving them the space to talk can often it works itself out, right? That doesn't mean you have to be okay with everything. It doesn't mean that you are going to agree with them, but talking to them and being able to connect with them often makes space for, what do you think I should do? So in the example of the shoe, when he threw the shoe at him and it was all mad and he was calling him an idiot, and he was able to vent his frustration, and then Bridger was able to ask me, Mom, I want to keep playing with Weston. What should I do? And he was able to actually ask me for that, rather than 3 minutes ago when he started the conversation, if I would have said, no, you got to go play with Weston. You don't have a choice. I'm not listening to that. It would have spiraled into like, no, I want him to go home, or he's dumb. And the rant would have been much longer and harder. And so just, again, you don't always have to agree with your kid, but making space for them to feel heard can be really helpful, and will also down the line, especially when they're teenagers and things like that, and they know maybe mom isn't always going to agree with me, but she's going to love me and support me, mom or dad, parent. Tip number 4 is encourage communication through play. Particularly in younger kids, a lot of times, it is always amazing to me when we're, playing in the sandbox, or when we are outside and we're we're just playing together, or we're going for a walk together, or we're, throwing a ball. Oftentimes it'll be like, hey, this happened to me on the bus today, or hey, I'm don't really like math, or my kids are at younger ages where they're not dealing with really significant it's significant to them, but they're not lifelong heavy things. They're not quite at the age where there's a ton of bullying happening. It definitely is happening a little bit, but anyways, they're just at smaller ages. And we don't have those as much, but I'm always amazed that when I sit down and take time to play with them, what I learn about their experience, what I learn about their world, what I learn about, what they're struggling with, or what's important to them, how their brain works. And so just taking time, oftentimes, but parents think that, and we all think, I think many times, like, ugh, if I take 10 minutes to play with you now, that's 10 minutes more that I'm not going to be able to get to sleep, and all those things. And it becomes really difficult. And I don't do it. But when I do pause and I take a minute, set a timer. I'm going to play with you for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. This is what I'm doing. I'm zoning in here. The other problem that I often see is that when parents sit down to play with their kids, they play with them. Their kid is actually the one playing, and the adult is scrolling through their phone or checking emails, or engaging in other conversations. And I would really encourage you to play with your child. There's so many different ways that you can play with your child, but pushing pause on life, and this is my world for 10 minutes. This is all that matters. Set a timer. That is often what's happened. What's very helpful for me is that, okay, I have 10 minutes and I'm going to give all that I can to you for 10 minutes. And then we've got to, go do other things. And oftentimes we keep incorporating our play through what we have to do, housework that we've got to do, or other family things that we have to go and do. Our play will continue, and you learn so much about your children, and create space for being able to more effectively communicate with them. Another thing that the last tip that I have is striking up conversations between activities. Oftentimes, I remember as a youth, I played a lot of soccer, and we had a lot of time in the car, whether it's traveling to practices or traveling to games. There were a lot of times in the car that we spent in the car. And some of my most favorite memories of my childhood are in the car with my mom. And even with my dad, when we would go, we did a lot of horse things as well. And, we live in the mountains, but we don't live that close to the mountains. So when we'd go to chase cows or gather cows or things like that, we'd have a fair bit of a drive. And the conversations that we would have in the cars in driving were significant to me, and they are part of my childhood that really stick out. And I see this often, as people are kind of transitioning in between activities, whether it's even at home, we're moving from playing to now we've got to go fix dinner. And some of those transition moments can be really helpful moments for people to connect with their kid. Again, doing things without having a direct eye contact conversation can be it's less intimidating for kids, and can be a way for them to open up. Another suggestion, and this is just kind of something fun that we do at our house. It isn't part of the tips, so here's an extra tip, a bonus tip for you. Tip number 6 today is spend some time, as you're going to bed, especially as your kids get older, to let them ask you questions. We do with our older kids, we do you ask us a question and we ask you a question, and so that's just a space for us to learn about our children, learn about connecting with them. They learn about us. They've asked us all sorts of questions about, like, what's our most embarrassing moment? What's our What was our favorite food as a kid? What sort of things did we like to do? What was our favorite song? Like, there's been a number of various things that we have learned about ourselves as well as our children, and it's a quick thing to do just before bed that encourages kind of conversation. Again, whatever you do to have those conversations, it's important that you're doing it in open ways, and really trying to avoid judgment and being lectury. Kids don't want to be lectured to or told what to do, and more than likely they may do it in the moment, but down the road you'll continue to have those same conversations that might become frustrating for you and for them in the end. You're more likely to get more meaningful conversation and communication between parent and child if you're able to do that from a loving, open space, non-judgmental, very curious space. So those are my tips for you today in being able to communicate more effectively with your children. I hope they were helpful and can't wait to hear how they work out for you. Thanks for listening.